Hey friends, I'm back again. I know I took a long sabbatical, but I just had a lot of things going on and I couldn't think of any videos to film and it was hectic. I got married and 2 states away and I had to plan going back and forth and just crazy. I'm still adjusting to a new job, but I'm hoping to be back. I know I keep saying that, but I have some new subscribers, and so I want to make videos for you guys again. You guys are motivating me to get back into it so that you're not subscribed to nobody. So to all you new people, hello and welcome. Thanks for coming and stopping by. Today I wanted to do the Top 5 Wednesday topic. I don't normally do Top 5 Wednesdays, but this one seemed really enjoyable. And the topic for today is 5 books that made you think. And this one was actually pretty easy for me to narrow down. And I know a lot of people are saying that they had a hard time choosing, and a lot of them chose 6, but it was easy for me because I don't really read a lot of heartwarming, fluffy, thoughtful books. My books are usually horror or thrillers. These are in no particular order except for my number 1 is my number 1 for like entire 2014, but the rest of them aren't really in any particular order. So the first one start with, which would be my number 5, would be Night by Elie Wiesel, and this really made me think and impacted me because it's about kids' journal and memoir into his time in Auschwitz, and this was actually his real story, and it's really short, and I've always been fascinated with Nazi Germany and just trying to figure out the psychology behind how so many people could follow Hitler and not think that it wasn't okay, and that's always been stuff that fascinated me, so I always try and get my hands on anything that has to do with the Holocaust that I can. This is really a powerful story. It's emotional, like a lot of these books aren't, because while a lot of them can be powerful and make you cry, this one was so much more because it's actually his true story. Like Anne Frank's was really powerful too, and it's about his story, and it just made me think about how far we have come as human beings. And while we still aren't perfect and we still do have a long way to go, I think that for the most part, I don't know if genocide to this extreme would ever be able to happen again, because too many people would stand up and say that it's wrong in the 21st century. So it just makes you think about how evil these people can be. It just breaks your heart to think of what these guys had to go through and try and put yourselves in the shoes of these people in this concentration camp. And that, I still think about this book, and it just really hit me in the gut. And I don't get a lot of those. Next book is one of my favorite books of all time. It's in my top 3 favorites. I don't count Harry Potter. Harry Potter is always going to be my favorite. But I like the whole series as a whole. So as of standalone novels, in my top 3. And that is The Kindness of Strangers by Katrina Kittle. This book I read, I think I was in high school the first time I read it. Ended up loving it. A kid goes through a hard time at his home, and he ends up being adopted by his best friend's mom. I think that they're around 11 or something. It's been a long time. But something happens in his home that is so earth-shattering. I can't tell you what it is without giving it away, but that's what made me think, like, this is what happens to a child while he's living at home with parents who are supposed to love and care for him, and to think that this stuff is going on to parents' knowledge, and with the kid being the way he is, he becomes secluded and depressed, and he even stops being best friends with his best friend, but it's not for a vindictive reason. It's actually for the most selfless reason you could actually ever possibly imagine. Just to think how this could happen, and to not care, not understand, not want to do anything. and then to find somebody who actually does care and to take him in. I want to think, like, what are humans? I realize that those are the type of books that make me think are books about the human condition, what human beings are capable of, because we like to think that, we're a superior race, and yet we're capable of so many unimaginable horrors. And that's what I've noticed are most of the books that make me think and that stick with me and keep my mind reeling after I read them, are to think about how humans can treat other human beings or treat anything, animals or the environment, in ways that try to prove that we're superior. The Kindness of Strangers is another one, and I definitely need to pick this book up again because I've been thinking about it since I stopped reading it. Another book I don't actually have with me. I read it and I got rid of it, which is how most of my books are, because while it was good, I will never read it again because I have too many other favorites. And that was If I Stay by Gail Forman, and that's a YA contemporary that most people have probably heard of. A girl gets in a car accident and she's the only one of her family that survives the car accident, and she has to pretty much decide whether she's going to live or whether she wants to die, because everybody involved in the accident with her was dead and she feels like she has nothing left to live for. So the whole book goes back and forth about whether she should decide to stay or whether she should decide to just let go. And that book really impacted me and made me think about how would human beings react in that situation. You lost anything and everybody that's important to you. You're not yet an adult. You're still a teenager. You haven't moved out of the house yet. How would anybody react in that situation? Would you choose to stay? And for the boyfriend that you do have, for the grandparents that don't have anybody left, for the rest of your life that you have ahead of you, would you choose to stay and live your life, or is the pain going to be too much and too unbearable that you want to just die along with them and you want to go? You don't want to pull out of your coma. You just want them to pull the plug. And I honestly don't know what I would do in that situation. And that book made me think a lot about what are the options and what would happen in that situation. But I think until you're actually put into that situation, you really can't know. I mean, you might think it's an easy decision to make. Like, why did she make the decision she did? And why did she take that long to make the decision? It was so easy. Maybe it really isn't. And that is something that I still sometimes think about. Like, what would I do in that situation? I hope I never have to experience that. I never have to know what I would choose. But it's an interesting thought nonetheless. The next book, I read this recently, and I picked it up on a whim at the bookstore because of the cover, and I read it in like a day and a half. I loved it. It was The One and Only Ivan by Catherine Applegate, and she wrote the Animorphs series, and I really loved this one. This is always going to be on my favorite shelf for the rest of my life, probably. It is a children's book. It did win the Newbery Medal, but it's based on a true story, which makes it that much harder to read and digest. And this is about a gorilla named Ivan who lived in a shopping mall in Washington State, and that was another reason why it was big and important to me, because that's the state I moved to, and it kind of eats me up a little bit inside. I think that this was in the 70s. I forget when the date was now, but it was back when it wasn't considered animal cruelty to live in a shopping mall. They took him from the wild, not the person who owned him, but he was eventually sold to him later on. And they just left him in a small glass cage in the shopping mall so people could come and look at him and gawk at him. And he had the TV and books and some papers. He liked to draw crayons and stuff in his room, but he didn't have a natural environment. He didn't even have any bamboo to swing from or any other gorillas to talk to. And he was finally released and freed because there was animal activists and stuff made a huge outrage about him being locked away in there, because people finally started to realize that it wasn't okay. And this is about his story, but he lives with other animals. He lives with an elephant and a dog, amongst other animals. And there's a little girl who takes notice of him, and it was this story with a really good light. It wasn't as bad as the actual story is, because it was portrayed to be for little kids, but it did ultimately have the book as well as the real story ultimately had a happy ending. Just, again, this is about the human condition, and it still goes on. It's still prevalent every day. I love animals. I'm a huge animal activist. Like, any animal torture, animal cruelty just splits my heart in two. And it doesn't matter what type of animal it is. Like, I have the biggest heart for animals. I love animals more than I love humans, and just to get business, just to keep the mall afloat, because it's suffering. It's in like one of the nastiest places in Washington. It's in Tacoma, and he buys a gorilla and just leaves him in there, doesn't care that he doesn't have any friends, he doesn't have any type of life, and he thinks it's okay to leave him in there. And that was just another story that it just drives me insane. But again, I'm thinking about it after I already read it, to just think, how can humans be that way? Then the last book, which is book number 1, is the book that I think had the most impact and made me think the most after I read it. And I left a huge review of this on Goodreads because I was that touched by it, and I definitely loved it a lot more than I thought I did. Like, if I could have given it 1,000 stars, I would have given it 1,000 stars instead of just 5. Probably one of the best books I've ever read, and that is Wonder by R.J. Palacio. And the basic premise of this is that a kid was born with a very severe facial deformity, and he was homeschooled for most of his life until he is supposed to enter 5th grade, and then his parents decide to put him in a mainstream school. Needless to say, because of the deformity, and kids and people in general aren't used to change and don't really like people that look different, he wasn't greeted very well. He didn't have a very warm reception. But the book turns around, and people grow to love him. He goes to be one of the most popular kids in school because they realize he's just like everybody else. He may have a deformity, but people grew to love him, not for what he looked like. And this book I probably think about every day, and just how impactful it was. Because to think that he went to school with everybody hating him, and then everybody grew to love him, that just shows the quality of the human spirit. Like, after all these negative things, the Holocaust and animal cruelty and all the stuff that happens, that there can be love and there can be kindness in the world. And it starts with the children. It starts with the kids who see all this every day and choose to put a stop to bullying and put a stop to just unacceptance, indifference of people who are different. And that was just the most amazing book ever. And I could not praise this book enough. If you have not read this yet, then you need to read it, because it's just the most inspiring, heartwarming book I probably have ever read, and this was by far my favorite book that I read in 2014. That's it. And so those are my books. Those are the 5 that I chose. So let me know down below if you have read any of these, what you thought of them, what your books that made you think were. Yeah, let's get a discussion started, and I will hopefully see you guys soon. Bye-bye.